I mean, there's a great Ian Hislop clip from Have I Got News For You about 10 years ago where he's on with Priti Patel and she says, well, you know, it's fine. And he says, no, don't say, well, you know, because he'd be dead.
Now then, so let's talk about, Carol, another Labour plan to go soft on criminals.
Do you know what? This is astonishing. So this week it was announced that criminals will only serve a third of their sentence, which is pitiful enough. And then yesterday we're told that the recall system for people who spit on that and commit crimes as soon as they get out, the recall is only going to be 28 more days in prison.
This includes sex offenders and violence.
Yes, and they said, remember they said they were never going to let those people out, and they did let all of those people out. So now if you break the terms of your release, you get another 28 days, which will probably be half as well. They'll probably let you out after a few. And this is, you know, we've got this woman, Shabana Mahmood, presiding over a total breakdown in law and order. Where is the justice for people who've been victims of crime?
I agree.
There is no, you know, our whole system seems to be focused on the people who commit crime and their needs and their wants, but not on the victims of crime. So now if you commit a rape, which you tend to get about 3 or 4 years for, you're going to be out in a year. So what price is a woman, you know, in this society?
And the conviction rate is incredibly low for
low
rape and
anyway,
sexual assault,
exactly
as we know. But I have to take issue with your characterisation, Carol. This is Labour cleaning up the mess of the last 15 years. I know people are bored of hearing it. Yes, because under the Tory government and the coalition before...
Do you know how many prisons the Tories built?
They built 13,000 places and closed 12,500, so that's a net gain of 500.
Prisons they built.
Nothing.
With plans more for 2, and the Labour only have plans more for 3, and have not said when they're going to be built.
There's an easy solution to this prison crisis. Kick out these foreign prisoners. Just 10,500 of them. Just get proper return agreements. Kick them all out.
But how hard is it to make detention-like centres to put people in for soft crimes like, no, I say soft, they're not soft if it affects you, burglary, whatever. You know, we don't need hardline jails for that. But there has to be a consequence. And when there is no consequence, people are just it's, you know, that's why violent crime is rising.
The immediate problem is that our prisons are at 98% capacity.
Yeah.
We're going to run out of prison space in November. We nearly ran out of prison space last summer. So there is, in the short term, there is an imperative, unfortunately, to release some prisoners or to release some prisoners early. The point is they need to be really careful about looking at they said, let's not release violent criminals, sexual offenders.
And then did.
And they did, and they absolutely mustn't do that again. But they need to look at people who are in there for, as you said, for softer crimes with shorter sentences and releasing those people instead.
It didn't help last summer when they shoved hundreds of people in prison who'd put out stupid, inflammatory tweets about the Southport riot.
And there's a lot of those people
why do they have to go to prison?
A lot of those people are in jail. Why aren't they getting out early?
Yeah.
And we should talk about the Peter Sullivan case, really. It's a good follow-on from this, isn't it, really? This is the man who was jailed for 38 years for a crime he didn't commit. And the story this morning, which is shocking beyond words, is that the maximum compensation this man can get is £1 million.
It's appalling, isn't it?
For 38 years.
The whole lot of his life.
Well, yeah, it's a wrecked life, but it's just this. I just read this today, which was shocking. I didn't realise this. There'd been 2 people who've been given compensation in jail. In September last year, High Court judge awarded a guy called Stephen Wilson £5.4 million for being stabbed in a prison canteen. So he got and then another man who was an epileptic who fell out of his bunk in jail, he got more than £4 million. So why is Peter Sullivan just getting £1 million?
That is extraordinary. They've got to do something about that, Andy, haven't they?
Yeah, that is
his
crazy.
Entire life has been, adult life has been, he's lost it.
It's one of exactly. It's one of those where there's no real amount of financial compensation that can truly make a difference, that can truly compensate for that. But of course, £1 million, 38 years, you divide that million by 38. It's not very much money.
And what prosecutions are going to happen because the DNA evidence has been around for the last 10 years, which would have proved his innocence. Yeah. Who was going to be charged over that? Who was going to go to jail over that? And, you know, who was in prison for 38 years anymore? For anything.
It's also a very good example of why we shouldn't have the death penalty. So every time people are saying, well, let's bring back the death penalty. I mean, there's a great Ian Hislop clip from Have I Got News For You about 10 years ago where he's on with Priti Patel and she says, well, you know, it's fine. And he says, no, don't say, well, you know, because he'd be dead.
Yes, but the thing is, you know, Peter Sullivan is not dead, but he has had no life. And that is the bottom line here. So, with £1 million, he probably couldn't buy a house. If he wanted to buy a house in London, he couldn't get a flat for that in this city. No. So how is he going to rebuild his life? And he's only had 29 grand of it so far, which is beyond shocking.
Andy, what's this story that David Lammy's got himself into some sort of trouble in the French Alps over a taxi fare?
Well,
our diplomat in chief.
This sounds bad, and I think I know that Carol has a different different view to the one I do. But here's the key point in this Mail story, right? So David Lammy, he's in the Alps, he's with his wife, and he takes a taxi, and it's an expensive taxi ride, right? So he gets to the end, and he's asked to pay 590 quid.
And he's on official
pretty expensive
business?
Taxi.
He had been, but then he wasn't. He was going skiing.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
So it was after that, so he has to pay. But the Mail understands that the driver, who was sitting next to his wife, opened a compartment and showed her a knife while demanding more money.
What?
So
we have only.
That seems pretty threatening to me.
Well, is it threatening? I mean,
yes.
You
Showing someone a knife.
It to me as he pulled a knife on it. Well, no, he didn't. But if you're owed 600 quid for a cab fare, you don't know who the people in the cab are. You know, as far as he didn't know who Lammy was. He had no idea.
Something to do with the British Embassy, he said.
So but you don't know what's going to happen to you if somebody suddenly says, "I'm not paying your fare." What's going to happen? So I just think it's really shocking that the driver has been charged with stealing his luggage, because what the driver did was chucked him out, kept the luggage, and then went to the police station.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound like a man who was about to stab somebody when he goes to the police station.
Because he did go to the police station with the luggage, which was quite an interesting twist to that story.
Yeah, it's a funny one, but I just think there is absolutely a campaign to discredit and besmirch David Lammy across the whole press.
He does that all of his own volition.
You might say that. Actually, I think he's quietly getting on with doing quite a decent job, actually.
What do you think he's done?
I do, because I think our diplomatic relations with major allies and with countries across the world have improved.
What about the ones he insulted? What about America?
But he's got a perfectly good relationship with JD Vance. They got on really well, apparently. We've just done a trade deal with them.
Well,
so
JD
that seems
Vance
to be going all right.
politely forgave the things he said about him and about Trump.
But apparently they've bonded over having some kind of similar-ish sort of upbringing. I mean, it's not quite.
Has he worked out yet that the black smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel during the Papal Conclave is not racist?
Oh,
as he suggested during
he did
during the conclave for was it Bennett? No, it was Francis.
Yes, a few years.
Did he really?
He really did.
He did.
And he then put a statement out apologising for the suggestion.
Okay, well, I'm not going to defend that.
And he thought that Marie Antoinette discovered radiation.
He did.
That's what
and he also was asked which monarch followed Henry VIII when he was on Celebrity Mastermind, and he said Henry VII. Of course you'd say
we're not all historians, are we?
Well, look, I mean, I think the David Lammy issue that I can't forgive him for was when he was asked about trans men, and he said you could grow a cervix.
Exactly.
With the right hormone.
That's the other one.
I mean, look, men don't necessarily know the intricacies of the female fertility system, but nevertheless,
hopefully more than that.
He's married and he's got children, so he might have a bit of a better.
But he is as thick as mince, and this man is in charge of our foreign affairs.
Say what you mean, Malone.
Well, but he is. How can you think that Marie Antoinette invented radiation? How can you think the black smoke coming out of the Vatican is racist?
The thing I find astonishing is that he was prepared to pay £1,000 for a taxi fare.
Well, do we know if he was going to try and claim it back on expenses?
Well, that's right. It was £970 was the total.
Yeah, that's not a cheap cab, is it?
We do have to read a statement from the Foreign Office. The spokesman said, we totally refute these allegations. The fare was paid in full. The Foreign Secretary and his wife are named as victims in this matter, and the driver's been charged with theft. There we are.
I wonder what the nation will think of that, though.